And they're like, yeah, he died in June. And so I said, okay, this sounds crazy. I'm like, I saw him yesterday up there where he's always at. And she's like, and she just kind of shook her head and was like, yeah, you're not the only one. Like, a lot of people have seen it since that happened.
You are listening to Terra Signals, presented by Normal Paranormal. I am your host, Justin Bamforth. In 2021, I had the opportunity to speak with TJ Miller and Mike Brown. They have been friends for decades and have experienced several strange events. Now, one of which was witnessed firsthand by TJ and several others at the Pennsylvania Renaissance Fair in 2008. When I first heard about this story, I was stunned and I had to learn more. So I arranged for TJ to officially go on the record and retell his story, hoping that it would encourage others who may have had similar experiences to do the same. Now here's the actual interview I conducted with both TJ and Mike, and I think you'll find it rather fascinating. The first time that I heard about this case, it was on Mike Brown's podcast, The Bunker, which is an excellent podcast, which you've been a co-host in. And
I have. I like to think of myself as like the skeptic on the show.
That's good. Now it is TJ Miller that we're speaking with here. And in that episode, TJ, you referenced a very strange experience at the Renaissance Fair that you work at.
Yes.
First off, let me ask you, how does one get involved with the Renaissance Fair first?
How do you get involved with the Renaissance Fair? Well, for us, I think what happened was Mike and I, our friend Seth, our friend Jay, who else was involved in the little crew? We had a year where we discovered Renaissance Fairs. We played Dungeons and Dragons our whole lives. Yeah. And I think we probably saw Braveheart shortly before that.
Yes.
So we went to the Ren Fair all year, like every weekend, dressed up as Scottish dudes. It was a safe place for us to pretend to be Scottish and like eat turkey legs. So the way I got involved with the Renaissance Fair is the following year, I didn't want to pay to get in. So I auditioned for the cast, me and Jay, our buddy Jay, and we got in. I had no plans to be an actor or a director or anything like that. But we got in. I thought I was just going to get to be a Scottish dude. Turns out they made me an Irish guy that year. And that was kind of it for me. And then I was in the volunteer cast at Pennsylvania for 2 years. And then the third year, I got into the professional acting company. I'd never had any formal acting training, but that was how we got into it, was pretty much by accident. And I've been there ever since. I own the New Jersey Renaissance Fair now. So I spent 2 years in the volunteer company, 2 years in the professional acting company. And then I was, actually it was more than that, because then I was also directing. I played like Francis Drake for 3 years. In 2005, I was the lead of the show. It was like Francis Drake versus Grace O'Malley. And then I moved into like a director role after that. And then I opened a Renaissance Fair in 2010, I believe, with my buddy John Williams, who I met out there, and some other people. So it was really an accident. I just fell in love with it. I love interactive theater. I love the way that we're actually out interacting in an improvisational way with our fans. So it's not like when you're on the screen or you're on the stage where there's that separation. You actually have to develop your character and interact as that character. It's a really cool exercise. So for me, it was really by accident, and just kind of fell into it.
So you have quite a history then involved with the community.
Yeah.
And
you can say that.
And that's really cool. How do you, I mean, when you connect with these other actors, like, does it become like a lifelong friendship? I mean, for the most part, where like you bring them to all the other fairs and what have you?
I don't know if I'd say it's a lifelong friendship, but it is a really intense. One of the things, I'm a philosophy guy myself, and we sort of have these stages in our lives. I feel like, you got like your high school friends who are your real core group. I think it's really weird actually that Mike and I, it's one of the rare things, like we've been friends since high school, and our buddy Seth. And I don't think that happens a ton. You kind of move through these different phases of your life, and then, you have your college people, and then you get your job. And while you're there, you feel like you're going to be in touch with those people forever, but it doesn't ever usually happen. The bonding experience that happens in a Renaissance Fair cast is intense. It's awesome because you're working so closely with those people for such a long period of time, and you feel like you're going to stay connected to them forever because it's super intense. But then you don't. And every year it's a new group of people who you're really intensely connected with. So there are people from the Ren Fair. John Williams, who I mentioned, I met him early on in my career, and now we own a fair together. We do a comedy sword fighting show called the Lords of Adventure, where we travel around the country and do comedy sword fighting. But there's a ton of people who I was super close with at the fair who I don't talk to, regularly anymore. So yeah.
Now, this particular experience, did this happen in Lancaster, Pennsylvania?
Yeah, this happened at the Renaissance Fair. Yes.
Gotcha.
During the day when the fair was open.
Gotcha.
Is when it happened. Yeah.
So, just to kind of set the stage, you had been working at the Renaissance Fair there for how long at this point?
What do we say year he died? 2008?
2008, yeah.
Yeah, so that would probably been the 2008 season. So I was there for 10, 11 years at that point. There were a couple of years I wasn't there, but I started 11 years before that.
And this gentleman who we're speaking about, John Fisher.
Yes, sir.
How long had he been involved with this particular Renaissance Fair?
He was there as long as I could remember. He sold anoles, which they call baby dragons. And he would always be standing. When you come in the gate at the Pennsylvania Renaissance Fair, if you make a right, you go down the hill, straight down the hill. If you make a right before you go down that hill, you can go down another hill that's parallel to that hill, which I think is called Guildsman's Way. And he would stand at the top of Guildsman's Way with all these anoles all over him. And he would just point people in the direction of where you could buy them down the hill. So as long as I could remember, he was always there every day at the top of the hill with his dragons all over him, just smiling at people going by. I never really, my interaction with him was always the same thing. When I was playing Francis Drake, because Francis Drake was known to the Spanish as the dragon, Drake is the dragon. So I would walk by him as Francis Drake and say, "Oh, look at that, baby dragons. They call me the dragon. You should get a baby dragon." And he would just kind of smile and nod because I was helping him sell his stuff. And that was the interaction I had with him every day. For years, he was always there as a fixture at the top of the hill. So I can't tell you exactly when he started, but as long as I could remember, he was, a feature of that spot at the Renaissance Fair.
Gotcha. And how were you formally introduced to John? I mean, were you introduced by other people, or
I was never introduced to him. I don't think I ever had a conversation with him. I saw him. The interaction I just told you is how I knew him. We interacted on the street together. I didn't know his name until I asked when we started talking about doing this episode. There's a Facebook group on that is for the people who are. It's called PARenfair.net, and it's a bunch of people who work at the Pennsylvania Renaissance Fair. So I honestly did not know for sure what his name was until I posted there and asked people if they remember him and if they had these experiences, because I heard a lot of people had very similar experiences to what I did.
All right, let's get into your experience. What took place?
So I was involved in a singing group called the Bully Boys, and every day we would meet at the gazebo, which is the top of the hill right when you come in the gate of the fair, and we would sing with a female singing group who I can't remember quite what their name was. But we would always sing with them during the day. So this was Sunday. The experience happened on Saturday. So Saturday, I walked by John. I had the same exact interaction with him I've had for years, buy a baby dragon. I saw guests, looking, they were standing there, right? And I walked over, did our set, walked away. Now, Sunday, I walked past that area. The interaction I had with him that day was exactly the same
Mhm.
and as clear as I'm looking at Mike right now
So let me
with
just
him.
okay, let me just ask for clarification. So when you
Yeah.
say Sunday, this is in June?
No,
Or was
this
okay,
is the fair runs August through October. So
August through
sometime
October.
during the run of the fair. This is a
Okay.
Saturday. I saw John, hey, buy some baby dragons. Same interaction, smiled at me, saw some people there, regular patrons, walked over, did my set. The next day on Sunday,
Yeah.
this is what allowed me to know if this Sunday thing didn't happen, I would have no idea anything was weird.
Okay.
Okay. So Sunday, I walk past that spot and there's a picture of John on the tree. Right. So I walk over to the place where I'm singing with the girls and the guys. And I asked one of the girls, I said, why is that guy's picture on the tree? And she goes, oh, he died. And I said, what? I'm like, oh my God, what happened? Like, holy cow. She's like, yeah, he had a long time thing with, whatever the chronic condition he had. Yeah, he had a long time thing with that and he died. And I'm like, oh my God, are they okay? Or, well, yeah, I mean, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, what, when did this happen? And she said, oh, June. Right now, bear in mind, it's August to October right now. And so I thought I'm like, no, he didn't. I just saw him yesterday right there where I always see him. And she goes, no, dude, he died in June. And I'm like, no, he didn't. Like, stop. So I went down the hill to where the booth was that he worked. And I asked them about it. I said, hey, this is a weird question. Did the guy who sells the dragons up the hill, did he die? And like, yeah, he had a long time, battle with, I think it was cancer or whatever. And I'm like, and they're like, yeah, he died in June. And so I said, okay, this sounds crazy. I'm like, I saw him yesterday up there where he's always at. And she's like, and she just kind of shook her head and was like, yeah, you're not the only one. Like, a lot of people have seen him since that happened. So that was what happened to me. And as I said before, I don't know if this was when it was recording, but like, I've been on the Bunker podcast with Mike, and I consider myself very skeptical about a lot of things. Mike and I lived in a haunted house for years and nothing convinced me or whatever, like there's like these footsteps in the attic, which to me, I'm like, something like that. I'm like, that could be the house settling. That could be some wind. That could be a raccoon. This is one I saw him as clear as I see Mike sitting here. So yeah, that's the weirdest thing that's ever happened to me along these lines of things.
So that was Saturday. You said that you saw him.
Yeah. And then Sunday was when they told me that he had died. And then that's when I went down and had the conversation with the people at the booth.
Gotcha.
Saturday, I had no idea anything happened. I just saw him and walked by. Like I said, if Sunday didn't happen, we wouldn't be having this conversation right now, because I probably wouldn't have known he died to this day. It was the same interaction I always have with him. There was nothing strange about it.
Right. But you said that you saw that picture on the tree on Sunday, right?
Yes.
And that is what prompted you to then ask what's going on here. Do you recall ever seeing him on other random days, just, before or before that particular Saturday, like between the day that he died, which was June 8th, and that day in August, presumably, that you saw him?
Yeah, it could have been any time in the fair run. It could have been August, September, October, So.
Okay. Do you recall ever seeing him just a couple of days before that Saturday, or?
No, I didn't. I can't tell you. I don't know. It was that long ago, and it wouldn't have surprised me if I did, because he was just a fixture.
Gotcha.
It would have been no more strange for me to see him than it would be to see the glass blowing booth, which is right there.
Right.
So
now after
I can't tell you.
Okay. Now, after you had this experience, what do you make of it at that particular time? Were you thinking you were losing your mind? Did you? Did you actually see a ghost? Like, what was going through your mind, especially as a person?
Well, and again, like, okay, when I say I'm skeptical, it's not that I don't think that these things don't happen. It's just that I think most of the time they don't happen. Most of the times when people tell you they happen, I don't think they happen. So I'm not a non-believer. I think I believe there are ghosts and such. I just think most of the times when people talk about it, they're full of garbage, right? So, and I still, like, as I say, skeptically, like, I believe I saw him there, and it was the Sunday night that I found out about this, I was telling some friends about it. And so after hours at the Pennsylvania Renaissance Fair, um, they have drinks and food and stuff. So a lot of people kind of hang out. So my friends, Jen and Amber and I, they're like, well, we got to go over there. We got to go over there. So we went to the spot. And I think for me, we went over there at night and we're hanging out, looking for him. And I realized that night while we were out there, that's not the time he's going to be there, right? Because the time that he haunted that spot in life was when the fair was open and people were walking around, And at that point too, where we knew he was dead, we weren't going to see him anyway. I think the thing that allowed me to see him was the fact that I didn't know he was a dead guy. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. When you had this experience though, did other people, you said that you went to this, discussion area or this forum, and you started asking if other people had similar experiences.
Right.
Tell me a little bit about that, like how that came to be.
Well, I knew my friend Sherry, who you have the recording of, who I talked to. I knew she had seen him because we had talked about it in the weeks that followed, and that was sort of where her interaction with him, and I won't say much about it because we have the recording of like what she said or whatever, was the same interaction she always had with him. Because as I understand from her, every morning he would come by and ask her how her husband was doing, because he was out in I think she's in New Mexico or something. And she had that experience with him where, he came by in the morning and was like, how's your husband and all this kind of stuff. And that's what it sort of seemed to be, is people kind of just sort of, we all saw him before we knew he was dead, which I think allowed us to be in a frame of mind where we could experience it, and the interaction I had with him, as I told you, is the same interaction I always had with him. It was expected. It was nothing strange about it to me until after I knew. So Sherry was the only one I, talked directly to about it.
Okay. When you talked to Sherry about this, were you aware that she had the same experience when you relayed your experience?
No, I was not.
So
I don't know how the conversation started. I used to talk to her quite a bit. We were pretty good friends. So I would talk to her going by. And when I told her, she said, yeah, and then that's when she told me about her experience too. I didn't go to her as someone, who I thought had the same experience as me. I was just telling her as a friend,
Yeah. And then when you hear her telling this, essentially a very similar, if not, identical type of experience, again, what goes through your mind at that point? Are you like, okay, there's something to this now? I'm not going out of my mind. I'm not going crazy.
No, and I never thought I was going out of my mind. I just thought I saw him.
Okay.
As I said, I'll be skeptical. If you tell me you see some orbs or, there's like a wind in my house that's a ghost, I'll be like, yeah, okay. But if you, like with this, and again, I think if somebody told me this, I'd be skeptical about it. But for me, having the experience, I just saw the dude, and it makes sense to me that the time that we would see him is the time that he was there anyway. Like, I don't think you would experience him at night when the fair's closed. The time you're going to experience John Fisher is when the fair's open and there's life and there's little kids who are looking for baby anoles. That's when he was alive in that place, and I think that was when we experienced him. For Sherry, it was the time that he had interaction with her was like, as Faire was like coming to life in the morning before they opened, he would walk by to get his coffee or whatever. And that's when they would have conversations. So, it wasn't like I walked out there at night and he was like standing there in like a halo.
Right.
That would have been weird. But the fact that I saw him with his baby dragons during the fair day, like normal, there was nothing weird about it to me. And also the thing that I recall feeling about it was how, just like how cool it was. Like this guy loved this place and he's hanging out, like I never, that was kind of my reaction. That was the reaction I think that Sherry and I had when we were talking about like how cool it was that he came by to check on us, make sure stuff was cool.
So let me ask you this then, TJ, like when something profound like this happens, not in the typical Hollywood, presentation, if you will, it still doesn't fit with the human logic, right? It doesn't fit within our worldview. This should not have happened. right? I mean, this
Right.
is something that is essentially impossible, and yet
Hmm.
it did. So when I'm saying like, I guess I'm surprised that you were that cool with it, that you were that calm about it, considering that
Yeah.
this is like, it's like seeing like a Tyrannosaurus Rex, out in the
Hmm.
in reality. That's
Yeah.
impossible. And yet, you know, um, like how do you find that a little weird that you're so okay with this?
I, I don't know. I mean, I feel like I said before, like I think that things happened. Like, I'm definitely of the mind of, you know, Shakespeare, and that there's more things in heaven and earth than are dreamt of in your philosophy, my dear Horatio.
Mm.
Um, so I'm not surprised. And we just the podcast that Mike and I just did talking about Carlos Castaneda and like the stuff that we used to do. When I was in high school, we experienced some weird stuff. You know, so it's I don't know. I was never surprised by it at
Okay.
all.
So you were
Yeah.
no stranger to this strange world, if you.
Right. Again,
Okay.
I think when I say I'm skeptical,
Mhm.
I'm mainly skeptical because I think people want to see stuff a lot, right? So again, it's not that I don't believe that these things don't happen. I just think that they're more rare, you know.
Yeah.
And I would be skeptical if you told me that you saw this guy
Mhm.
as not having been there and just having to take your word for it. I would be skeptical. People listening now should be skeptical. They weren't there to see it, you know. But for me, it's very real. I actually experienced the dude, and I
Yeah.
can't. It's not a sound or a rustling or a shadow. I saw and had an interaction with this guy, you know.
Yeah.
So to me, I experienced his spirit.
And I think, just to interject for a second, like having been a paranormal investigator, been out in the field and, went into people's homes who believe they have activity, you're absolutely right that probably about 70 to 80% of the time, whether or not there's legitimate activity in someone's home, like most of the stuff that people point out is quote unquote
Right.
paranormal, is just normal stuff that they're ascribing to that phenomenon
Mhm.
because that's where their head's at.
Yeah.
And like they are legitimately probably at some point here or there experiencing like maybe they did see a shadow walk past the
Mhm.
door, maybe the door did open or something flew off a shelf, and that
Right.
stuff happens. But because those things happen doesn't necessarily mean that, oh, when I shut this door and a suction from the draft opens this other door, that doesn't mean that that's also paranormal.
Right.
And
Right.
so, and I think that's kind of,
I
you're a
think,
healthy skeptic in that way, and you
and
don't.
me too. Make no mistake. In some ways, like what's his brain from X-Files?
Mulder.
Yeah, like I want to believe, like I want to see proof. And that's why I think my main reaction really when I think about this experience was like, this is cool. I saw a dead guy. That means something happens.
Yeah.
That was to me verification. Whereas, some things you hear about when people do like ghost investigating, I'm like, okay, maybe, right? But this for me, I saw him, right? So like, dude, and I say I don't know what to make of it. I believe I saw him after he died, which is cool. He wasn't trying to attack me. He was just cool with me. He had the same, he gave me the smile, he gave me the nod. He was happy I was still trying to help him sell his dragons in the afterlife. It was awesome. It was a great experience. And I think it was like that for everybody who experienced him,
Now, when you had your interaction with this man,
Mm-hmm.
how long was the experience? Would you say a couple minutes?
No. I would do a walk by. It was literally, I'm walking up the hill. I'd see him. I'd get close enough for the people standing there to see me and be able to hear me. And I would say, oh, baby dragons, those are awesome. I'm Francis Drake. They call me the dragon. You guys should buy a dragon. He would smile and nod. I would walk off. That's probably about exactly how long it was. Because like I said, we had the same interaction every time I'd go by with him.
Gotcha.
And it was a walk by interaction for me. I'd give him the nod and the wink, never asked him for a commission. These were his baby dragons. But that was about exactly how long it was. I never, like I said, I never stayed and like hung out and talked with him. It was always just like a quick thing, quick nod to him. Sort of situation.
So you saw the items that he was selling.
Yes.
With him, right?
Yeah, they were anoles, living
Right.
lizards. that were all over him.
The reason I bring that up is because in Sherry's testimony, she said the same thing, if I recall.
Yeah, I think so. Mm-hmm.
So at this point, it's not just John who is coming through, but it's also the lizards who, for all we know, we don't know what happened with those lizards. We don't know if those lizards are still alive in our physical plane or at that time, right? Or if they also had, passed on.
Well, I'm sure there were plenty of lizards that he had sold that are no longer with us at the time of his appearance, because they're like goldfish, kind of.
Okay.
They're not a long-term pet, if you know what I mean. It's a little sad.
They live a couple years. That's it.
Yeah, and he'd been doing that for years. So I'm sure at the end of the day, he would take his lizards back to the shop, and that's where the lizards would go.
Okay.
But I'm sure that a lot of the lizards that he had carried around were no longer, unfortunately, with us by the time John passed
on. So the reason I bring that up is, again, it's one of those subtle, very small details, right, that would be overlooked in the grand story that we have here, right?
Right.
Because we're so fixated on John Fisher and his appearance, but yet somehow he was also able to bring those lizards into this reality. That's interesting because, again, Mike, when we're looking at this from like a paranormal perspective, right, and you have like the apport phenomenon where physical objects just suddenly manifest. Would this be, an aspect of that in a sense?
Makes you wonder if he did, quote unquote, bring those with him, or was in this context John Fisher a manifestation of the collective consciousness of the Faire?
Right.
Because, like you said, and you've mentioned this many times when telling the story, that you didn't realize he was dead, and everyone that interacted with him, that saw him as if he was still there, did not realize that he had passed on. And so, was this, was it simply the lizards there because that's how he appeared every other time? And so everyone's sort of collective consciousness manifested that, because you expect him to be there, because that's where he always was. Like you said, every day, year in, year out, that's where he always was. And everyone else had the same interactions with him that they always had. There was nothing that really stood out.
It's interesting with Sherry, because I think normally when Sherry would see him in the morning, he would not have them. Like, if I would have seen him without the lizards, that would have been weird.
Yeah, because he always had them crawling all over him.
Because that's what he's doing. He was selling them. That might have made me, I don't know that I would have stopped or whatever, but that might have been like some kind of red flag. But the interesting thing about what you're saying, I think what you're saying, Mike, makes total sense for, me and other people. But it's weird with the Sherry thing, because he wouldn't be carrying his lizards up to go get coffee in the morning, when he talked to her. So that's kind of a fascinating thing about the whole lizard aspect, which I never thought of before. To me, it makes total sense that he had the lizards when I saw him, because that's how I knew him. I never saw him without lizards on him. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that is really interesting. And glad that you brought that up, Mike, because that kind of is a good segue into the fact that it wasn't just TJ, it wasn't just Sherry. There were other people involved here. We have the written testimony from Shauna, who she had emailed us her testimony. And she said, "Hey, TJ, that's an experience I will never forget. I don't remember what year it was, but it was when I was still working for Sherry before I bought the shop. So it would have been 2009 or 2010. Obviously, this would have happened in 2008 when he passed away. So perhaps her year was, a little bit skewed here, or her recollection of the year. But she goes on, and Shauna says, I saw him and spoke with him during Celtic Fling at the top of the hill, only to find out that he passed. Then I remember talking to you, and you saw him too. I believe Sherry spoke with him also that weekend." And then there's a little note here. She said the weird thing was that he was such a quiet man, but that day he was so friendly and talkative.
Yeah, again, there's a little inconsistency there with the quote unquote normal interaction. I mean, it was kind of.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing too. She's talking about Celtic Fling. Celtic Fling is either like May or June, so it could have well been 2009 for her for that.
Oh, really?
If her recollection is correct, yeah. Celtic Fling is before Faire.
Okay.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So I don't know if that was after the year. And honestly, yeah, I can't imagine they would have had the picture on the tree in 2009 the following year. Like my thing had to be 2008. I would
So,
imagine, because that's
so,
when they'd have the memorial up.
so wait a second. So if she is accurate in saying that she saw him and spoke with him during this Celtic fling, which would
Yeah,
have been 2009.
I would say it'd have to be, because I think Celtic Fling,
Okay.
unless I don't know what you'd have to check the dates on Celtic Fling, because Celtic Fling could have been before. Celtic Fling might be in June. It might have been 2008, right after he died.
Okay.
But it could have been 2009. I'm not sure exactly when Fling is. I think it's May or June, something like that.
Mike, see if you can look that up. While we're doing this interview here, because
here's the thing,
yep.
too. If you're talking about when I saw him, then it would almost have to be the following year, Celtic Fling. Because if she had that conversation with Sherry about me and all that stuff, because I would not have seen him because I wasn't there for Celtic. I definitely saw him during regular Renaissance Fair, which would have been August, September, October. So the following Fling would be after that in 2009. Time frame wise.
Right. So because if that is true, or accurate rather, and this Celtic fling took place in 2009, and she is seeing him almost a full year later, that is profound right there. I mean,
so this year, 2021, the Celtic fling was June 26th and 27th.
Right. So my only thing is, if she is accurate about having heard about me and then Sherry, I feel like it almost have to be the following Celtic fling. Because she wouldn't have heard about that at that Celtic fling. I haven't had the experience yet. Mine wasn't until the fall of 2008. Right.
Yeah.
So
that is incredible.
Look, it is really, it's the most incredible thing. It's actually funny because it's one of the most mundane, just walking by experiences I've ever had, but it's also probably the craziest, most profound thing I've ever experienced as far as this stuff goes. Mike and I, near our house in New Egypt, we both heard this sort of like wind thing, which was crazy too. But nothing like this. Even with that, I can find other explanations that are possible. With this one, like I said, as clearly as Mike is sitting in front of me right now, I saw, this guy,
Yeah.
So,
this is just such a remarkable story. Beyond you, Shauna, Sherry, were there anybody else involved that you had come across?
As I understand it, that's why I put the post up, because when I went to the booth, it sounded like, from what they were saying, that just a lot of people around were seeing him, and everybody was seeing him before they knew he was dead. The only one I could get a statement from were Sherry and Shauna, but as I understood, and I can keep looking, but those were the two who said stuff. But as I understood it from then, it was a lot of people, And I think I kind of vaguely remember certain people around there who I have no idea at this point in time who it was, jumping on.
Huh. I mean, I'm curious to see if, like, how long the sightings persisted. Obviously there's this common thread, right? People were seeing him, not aware that he had passed on. Yeah, it's so profound. I mean, this is what do you make of this, Mike? I mean, you brought up the whole collective consciousness thing.
Yeah, and I don't necessarily mean that to discount it, to say that that he wasn't there, because I could sit here and speculate all day. Again, I wasn't there, but I can come up with a bunch of different scenarios. Like, everyone's expectations of him being there is what sort of manifested him there. Or is it the fact that, like you said, and everyone said, that he was a fixer in that place. I remember going there with my daughters and like walking up to him, and he had the lizards crawling all over, and we thought it was so cool.
Yeah.
And and bought a lizard and brought it home. And he was there year in and year out for decades, maybe.
Yeah.
I mean, how long was the guy there? I mean, all the time. He lived and breathed that place. And so, having again been on a lot of cases and hauntings of legitimate people that are terrified of what's going on in their home, I've seen a lot of crazy stuff. I don't think I have seen anything as clear as a person sitting in front of me, but I've seen every illuminated thing and shadow and apparition and trick. I've seen all that stuff. I have never seen anything that crazy. It was so real that it was just a person.
And again, I don't think it's the collective consciousness. I don't mean that to say, or the fact that I don't think I could have seen him if I knew he was dead.
Right.
And I don't mean that to mean he wasn't there. Right. I just mean we have kind of a shared idea, like when you were talking before, Justin, about like, this isn't supposed to happen, right? We sort of have that rational thing built into us. So the fact that we didn't know he was dead allowed our rational minds to not get in the way.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, knowing that he was dead at that point, I kind of said that to him, like, I'm not going to see him again, because now that I know he's dead, now all of a sudden it's like into like high strangeness stuff, right? But the fact that I didn't know he could come up and say hi, and my rational beliefs and knowledge that he was dead didn't get in the way of that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, oh man, there's so many different angles, like so many different like
yeah, it's a crazy experience. Like, and that's what I mean. I believe that it definitely happened. I believe I saw the guy, but I don't know what to make of it exactly. There's all kinds of levels, and most hauntings happen when there's not a bunch of people around.
Right.
So the fact that he's showing up during a fair day when there's 10,000 people on the fairgrounds, is, and maybe that happens way more than we think, because
exactly.
Most of the time you would have no idea the dude's sitting next to you on the subways.
It
goes.
What'd be really interesting is if, obviously people are taking photos right during the event. I wonder if he showed up in any of those photos.
I don't know. That would be awesome.
Fair. Do you think there's like an archive somewhere, or like a gallery out there of that particular year's Renaissance Fair that we could just through the photos?
That's what I'm saying. You've got a big community, and there's a big community, and a Renaissance Fair is also a place that people love to take pictures. There's usually like 5 or 6 professional photographers walking around who what they do is take pictures of the Renaissance fairs.
Yeah.
Right.
So trying to get pictures from like 2008, seeing if anybody has pictures from 2008 at that spot would be the way to go on it. And actually the guy who moderates the site I was talking about, he is a photographer for the fair. So
interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that would be one of the next steps that we should take, right? Just to see, because you never know, right? Or what if there's something else unusual, and not a full-bodied apparition, but what if there's something else? Like one of the lizards or something, it's not supposed to be. I don't know. It's just, hypothetically.
That'd be awesome if there's a lizard in the bed. Oh, holy cow. That'd be so cool.
You know what I mean? But, it's just, and who knows, like people taking their own photos. Again, they have no knowledge of this man, right? And then what if he's showing up in their photos just in the background or something? Or what if he's not? That's, especially like what if they take a photo on the day that you were there, that you saw him, and there's clearly nobody there,
I've always kind of wondered about like because it was like I know it was definitely like a husband and wife and a kid. I can't remember whether it was a boy or girl or whatever. We're standing right there. And I always wonder if they didn't see anything. So I just walked up and said, "Oh, baby dragons, you guys should get a baby dragon," and then wandered off. Like I always wonder if that was their experience of that. Like, what is this guy talking about?
Mommy, why is the crazy guy talking to the tree?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, that's true.
I'd have no idea. There'd be no way to find out thousands of people there every day.
That.
But I wonder that years after, I'm like, wonder what those people, like if they saw him, because they might not have seen him.
Hey, that's why we're putting this out there, because you never know who might come across this, recording and think, oh yeah, I remember that crazy guy who was talking about the lizards. Now I know his name is TJ.
Oh my gosh, that'd be awesome. If I had that kind of effect on people, that'd be great if they remember that conversation for 2008.
um, so as Mike's getting the audio prepared, did John like act kind of like out of character? I mean,
The only ones I have are those two
okay.
that I got. For me, there was no out of character. He was just doing what he did.
Okay.
Interesting. All right, I have that audio ready.
All right, let's play it.
Hey, TJ, it's Sherry calling from Taos, New Mexico. So I guess I'm just going to leave you a message with the information because I'm not sure that I'll be able to contact you again right at the exact time. So basically what happened was I had come back to the Renaissance Fair. I didn't know that that he had died. And so I saw him there at the top of the hill, and all of a sudden, we just started talking, and I thought he was like a live person because he didn't look like a ghost. He looked exactly like he used to look like. And so what happened was he asked me, "Oh, is your husband coming to the fair this year?" And I said, "No, he doesn't like it." And he started laughing, and he actually had some lizards on him still, the baby dragons. He had those on him, which was really interesting. And then so it seemed like a normal conversation, and that we were just catching up. And then I think it was the next day there was a funeral for him, like some kind of event at the corner there where I saw him, and I said, "Who's that for?" And they said, "For him." And I said, "Well, when did he die?" And they said, "A couple weeks ago," even though I just talked to him yesterday. So that was my experience, and hope this helps you. And have a great day. Let me know if you have any other questions. Okay, take care. Bye-bye.
So there you have it. That's Sherry's testimony there that she had sent you. She mentioned there was a funeral type of event for him, and her recollection of the timing is that that was a couple of weeks ago from when she saw him. What do you make of this? Would that put her time frame, in June or?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, she could have been wrong. Or whatever. My thought until they told me when he actually died was I thought that day they told me he died in like February. From my my imperfect memory of those events, but turns out it was June. So yeah.
What was this funeral type of event that she's referring to, or was that the tree thing?
I don't know. I was not there for that.
It would be great to kind of like talk with Sherry and Shauna just to get some more information on what they experienced, because a lot of times, when people have such profound events occur, again, the human mind doesn't want to process it or believe it, so it tends to dismiss it and kind of like bury it, right? Or just okay, it is what it is, and then move on, right?
Yeah.
Because that's the only way the mind can really handle these things that shouldn't be taking place, right? Again, for most people. I'm wondering if you had not followed up on your own experience, had you not connected with some of these other people and asked them to tell or to talk about their experiences, if we would not be here today talking about this, if we would just have if this event would have just kind of like just faded in the background.
I think it did kind of fade in the background in some ways, if I wouldn't have if I wouldn't have talked to the girl in the band who told me that he died and then went down and asked at the booth about it, again, it didn't, without that context, it would have been just like any other interaction I had with him, in the years before. Like it would be no different for me than the time I walked up to him and 2006 and said the same thing to him every day of the fair.
Right.
That's just what it seemed like, you know. So the only thing that made it still so that we're talking about it today is the fact that I got the context of the fact that he died before, you know. And if I had heard years later that he died, I would have just assumed that this interaction I had with him happened before he died.
Right.
Yeah. I so happened to see the picture.
Yeah.
And it was the day after, you know, I had seen him was the thing that made it,
Yeah.
you know,
that's weird.
Profound.
Yeah. That's weird too, right? The very next day, the photograph is hanging up on the tree.
Yeah.
I
would have, I think that the photograph was probably there on Saturday too. I don't know when they put it up, but
I was going to ask that. Yeah.
I'm pretty sure it was probably there. I just didn't see it or notice it because I saw him and the
he was standing in front of it.
Yeah. People standing there.
Wow. I mean,
imagine the picture was there all season, probably, if he had died in June. I can't imagine they put it up that weekend because that was definitely not, I don't know what weekend it was of the fair. There's 12 or 13 weekends of the fair, but it definitely wasn't the first one because we were pretty far into it. And the one of the things I remember is, you know, we were pretty comfortable with the show that I was talking about, the singing show at that point. We'd been doing it for a while.
Well, you know, the reason I'm bringing up the photograph too is the implications of this. I mean, could it be that the phenomenon, you know, if we want to refer to it as that, has the ability to mask things from view and make other things visible? Let's say again, we can only speculate, but let's say the photograph was hanging up on the tree the whole time, but yet for some reason you just didn't notice it. Do you think you would have, you know, in your normal walking through the normal path, going through the area, that you would have come across it like just, you know, naturally? Or do you think you really had to look for it to find it? I mean,
I didn't really look for it. I just came by, but I also know me. So I definitely could have missed it, you know?
Okay.
Even if he wasn't standing there and have his thing, it's definitely possible that I would have walked by the picture many times before I took a notice of it being there. Like knowing myself.
Yeah, you totally could have, because like you had said before, and it's sort of it's one of the very charming things about the fair is that the staff and all the characters are in character the entire time and they never break character. And so if there's public around, you're in character and you're concentrating on that and your role in interacting with them and pitching, you know, different stuff, like helping the guy sell his dragons, like that kind of stuff. So you're in that mindset. So it would have been easy to sort of miss that.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you for helping me out on that. But let me be clear. If you could put a picture up on the door to my apartment and I could probably go past it 5 times before I noticed it was there. So I don't know how much, again, I can't imagine they put it up on a Saturday night of this random multiple into the fair week. So it was probably definitely there at least Saturday.
Yeah.
Right. But, you know, my thought would be that the picture would be there, you know, all season as a memorial to the dude if he died in June. So by the time we open in August, they'd probably have it there. But again, I can't say that the fact that I didn't see it means that it was like masked or whatever. Like I know myself too well to know that, you know, this is where the skeptic stuff comes in. Like, we're like, do you think that it was, I'm like, no, dude, I think I probably get hit in the head too much. I probably wouldn't have noticed it. There are more observant people you could probably ask who you could get a better read on that than me. But yeah, I wouldn't bet on the fact that it wasn't there just because I didn't notice it.
Hey, that's fine. That's why we are asking these questions, right?
Yeah.
I find it interesting how on John Fisher's obituary, there's a mention specifically about him selling baby dragons.
Yeah.
So this thing that he was, you know, selling at the Renaissance Fair, this was a big part of his life.
Mm-hmm. That's to me one of the things that's really so cool about this is he was there. And I think one of the things about the 3 accounts we have, we all found him to be very, you know, joyful. You know, this is the place he loved, doing the thing he loves, you know, and the fact that he was there was kind of a cool thing, you know, to me. So
So, aside from this experience, like, have you ever had any encounters of a similar nature in the past?
Not like this specifically. Um, that's not really completely true. I had a when I was very close with my great grandmother, and she died when I was 4. And I've never had any kind of problem with death, because what I've always said is like, my great grandmother let me know it was cool. And I did see her in a field waving at me when I was a little kid, when I was driving in a car with my mom. And it wasn't just, there was not, again, it wasn't, for me, that wasn't a weird thing at all. It was just, she was there and it was okay. Like that was the message. She was waving and smiling and it was okay.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. But, and then there's the wind thing is weird too. That's the other thing that I would say was like really weird that I experienced that I don't know how to explain.
Yeah, that was,
Um,
and what's interesting about that is that that phenomenon made its way into an X-Files novel taking place in the
Yeah.
area where we experienced it.
right.
That's a weird one.
Yeah. Now I've had a lot of weird experiences too, but all of them are kind of in that level of, even the thing with my great grandmother, I was 4 or 5 at the time. So I could tell you maybe that didn't happen. Right. The wind thing, we were out there, we heard this thing it was making me and my buddy Ron Dancer were on his tennis court, and we were like ducking from this thing we couldn't see, but hearing like right over the thing. I can tell you, I don't know, that might have been some kind of wind thing happening. Right. This one, I'm like, hands down, I saw this guy after he died in a full body apparition.
Yeah.
Very seeming corporeal, like, yeah. So
Yeah. That's just, it's an amazing story. And like
Yeah.
I said, having been on, probably a couple of hundred investigations
Mhm.
at this point, I've never come across anything like that. I've come
Yeah.
across every other kind of phenomena you've heard
Right.
of.
And I would let you tell me that about the experience with my great grandmother, like, well, maybe you were imagining that as a kid. And I'd be like, yeah, maybe I was, but this John Fisher one, I'm like, nah, dude, I saw him,
Yeah.
So
Now, you had also mentioned John Fisher's daughter, right?
mhm.
Did you tell her about this experience or?
Yes. I communicated with her after I put the post up on the Pennsylvania Renaissance Fair thing. Yeah.
Gotcha.
And
Now-
what she expressed was just how awesome he was and how it was cool that people were talking about him.
So,
I didn't get the impression that she had seen him.
okay. Did you get the sense that, that she believes your story?
Yeah. And I think she'd heard this kind of thing before.
Oh,
Mhm.
like with her father or with other people?
With people about her father from the fair.
Oh, so other people had told their story to her already.
That was the impression I got, that she wasn't surprised. And like I said, from the time when it happened, it seemed to me like a bunch of people at the time. I wasn't trying to like collect information, but I remember hearing people saying that, like a lot of people had seen him after he died.
I'm curious if his daughter had ended up seeing him at some point.
I just spoke to her recently, and I didn't get the impression that she did.
Okay.
This is very recent. So
Interesting.
Yeah. She may, I think she would have.
yeah, since we were talking
Mentioned
about the podcast is
Right.
when I communicate with her.
Okay. Now, all these people that saw John Fisher, yourself not included, because we already got into your relationship with him, but these other people, would you say that they were close with him, or they had a same relationship type dynamic that you had with him?
I think Sherry was a little closer with him than I was, but as I understood, the main conversation they would have was he would, ask her in the morning about her husband who was out in New Mexico, kind of thing. I don't think they
Okay.
were, crazy close. And I think it was a lot of people who were used to seeing him around Faire. I don't know who the closest people were to him who saw him or whatever, but
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that, again, just asking these questions because, I'm Mike, I'm curious to get your take on this, but like, I'm thinking why these people at the Renaissance Fair are seeing this guy if they're not really that close with him. Like, what's I mean, and the only thing I can, the only conclusion or somewhat of a conclusion I can draw is possibly this consciousness thing, right? Where everybody has this strong impression of this guy. And maybe that is what somehow manifests in his place. Again, just, hypothetically speaking.
Yeah, I think that consciousness definitely plays a role in all of this
Yeah.
in one level or another, in one form or another. Because I've just to, it may sound initially off topic, but I'll draw the connection I'm trying to draw is that, I've been on several cases where certain individuals that were apprehensive or even in some cases afraid of certain cases or certain areas we were going into, those people would almost always have a negative experience once we were in the space. Whereas Beth and myself would have a neutral frame of mind. We're just going to go there. We're going to see what happens, blah, blah, or a positive frame of mind or whatever. That seems to play a role in how things manifest to people. And I've been in a room with several investigators, and in this one case I'm thinking of, were more experienced than myself. But we're very apprehensive about this location because of its reputation. And I kind of heard the same thing, but I had a completely different experience, and I just stayed completely neutral about it with my frame of mind. And our individual experiences in the same space reflected that. And so I can't help feeling like the consciousness 100% plays a role. Your state of mind plays a role. And it ties into what you were saying about how everyone that saw him there, just that was the day-to-day experience, the day-to-day interaction you had with him. And that was the day and time of the day. You would see him there, and you had the same interactions you would always have.
And
and once you realize he was dead,
yeah,
he's gone.
Those people who were really close to him would also know that.
Correct.
I do actually. I found them. Her name was JC, was the daughter. She, I don't think, had heard any of these things because she said, but one thing she did say that was interesting is some of his ashes are on the hill, where I saw him in a coffee can. And then I told her my experience of it. And she said, thank you for sharing. I had not heard this.
Wow.
Before.
So some of his physical form that is left
his
is
ashes,
actually there.
Yeah, or on the hill where I saw him.
Interesting.
That was, like I said, that was his spot. So.
Wow.
That is remarkable. That just adds a whole nother layer to this mystery. Interesting. So I guess be careful where you sprinkle ashes. Wow. And that's see, that's the thing with these experiences, TJ. Like there are so many different layers, and it just brings up more questions, no answers.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
It is.
Well, and it's also it's partially to the way our memory works. All these little details, are, I don't. We were all talking, and we talked about it. I know we talked about it quite a bit, at the time at the fair, but I don't remember exactly what those conversations were or who they were with. Sherry was the only one I remember, definitively telling me, that story and confirming it. But I definitely know there were, that was, like I said, the kind of story was that, a lot of people were seeing him around,
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, this is a remarkable story. And I like to, do some follow up with this as much as we can, and maybe, get in touch with some of those other witnesses to, again, get their firsthand testimony, because it helps strengthen your experience, right? It just helps validate it. It helps, confirm it. I mean, there are so many experiences out there that people have. And the cool thing about you deciding to share your story and coming on the air and sharing it with the world is it empowers other people to step forward, to know that they are not alone. As crazy as it may seem in the experience, they may have a very similar experience to somebody else. but how would they know if they don't hear your tale, right?
Right.
And how would you have known about this had you not heard about it from other people? And how would they have heard about it had they not heard from you? And so on and so forth. So I just want to thank you for coming on and talking about this with us. It's a remarkable case.
Yeah, anytime. Like I said, I'll try to reach out to some of those people too. See about the picture thing, which I think would be really cool.
That would be
That's
interesting.
a great idea, actually.
See
Yeah.
some pictures.
And there's so many pictures taken around there all the time. Like,
I would love to see a picture of Francis Drake talking to a tree. Well, a bunch of guests just looking like, what the hell?
What is going on? I want to see that one too. Oh my goodness.
Amazing. That would be amazing. Wow. Well, hey, it's a strange world we live in, and strange things happen all the time.
It's true. More things in heaven and earth.
Yeah.
That's right.
Well, thanks again, TJ. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem, buddy. Thank you. Thanks for having me on. It was good to talk about.
In December of 2022, I followed up with TJ on the case to see if there were any new developments. More specifically, if there were any images from the professional photographer who may have captured John or the general vicinity where he was seen shortly after his death. Now, I was told that the photographer did not have any photos of that area at that time. But TJ also noted that he had found a brief entry in his journal about seeing John Fisher, but it wasn't very useful. Now, if you were present at the Pennsylvania Renaissance Fair in the summer of 2008, or recall interacting with an actor selling baby dragons, please send an email to info@normalparanormal.org. You could have additional information that helps us better understand this event and grasp these mysteries. If you have an unrelated but still interesting story to share, please visit normalparanormal.org and click the contact form. You have been listening to Terror Signals with Justin Bamforth and presented by Normal Paranormal. For more on this show and other topics of high strangeness, please visit normalparanormal.org or visit the program website at terrorsignals.com.